Hey there, this is James Moffitt with Liberty and Gun Rights Podcast. I'd like to invite you to support this podcast by sending a donation to my PayPal account at jcmoffitt@icloud.com. That's JCMOFFITT at icloud.com. Or you can also visit my website at https://libertyandgunrightspodcast.buzzsprout.com. That's BUZZ sprout.com. You can choose to be either a sponsor or a subscriber to the podcast. Your support will go towards underwriting the cost of producing this podcast. You can contact me with any questions at lgrinfo@proton.me. That's lgrinfo@proton.me. Thank you for listening to these podcast episodes, and now to the feature presentation. Hello, and thank you for listening to Liberty and Gun Rights Podcast. Please subscribe and follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, and take the time to leave a review. Our Instagram channel is instagram.com Liberty Gun Rights. Video episodes are uploaded to rumble.com and my YouTube channel, and my YouTube channel and Rumble is called James Moffitt. You can just search for it. Please subscribe and follow these channels for future updates. I release episodes every Friday at 8 a.m. Thank you for listening, and now to our featured episode. Welcome to the Liberty and Gun Rights Podcast, where we stand for the Constitution, defend the Second Amendment, and speak with those on the front lines of preserving American liberty. Today I'm joined by Arthur Hampton of the John Birch Society, an organization committed to limited government, personal freedom, and the protection of our God-given rights. ABS has been a powerful voice in the constitutional movement for over 60 years, and Arthur brings a deep understanding of how grassroots action and informed citizens can shape the future of our republic. In this episode, we'll talk about the importance of local activism, the threats to gun rights and civil liberties, and how families can instill constitutional values in the next generation, especially as our freedoms face increasing pressure. If you care about liberty, personal responsibility, and protecting your rights from government overreach, this conversation is for you. So let's dive in. Hello, Arthur. How are you?
Doing well.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the episode. I know you're a busy man.
Indeed. I manage every state from South Carolina all the way up to Texas and Kentucky down to Miami, Florida. So I stay busy.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. All right, so let's jump right into it. What do you see as the greatest threats to the Second Amendment rights today?
Right now, it's the Convention of States movement. They're calling for an Article 5 convention, and they're trying to overhaul the Constitution. Now, what they're going to try to do is say, well, we're not trying to change the Constitution, we're trying to amend it. And that's just rhetoric that they teach their people to say, but an amendment is a change. And understanding that maybe not the people on the ground level, but the higher ups within that movement, they've already got a new constitution written, and it's bad. They call it a conservative constitution written by Robert P. George that is on the advisory council for Mark Meckler and the Convention of States project. And he calls it a conservative constitution, but there's nothing conservative about it. The First Amendment's gone. The Second Amendment is there in name only. And I think the wording was pending the approval of government agencies, which is not a Second Amendment. If we want you to have guns, you can have guns. The Fourth Amendment, our right to privacy, search and seizure's gone. The Fifth Amendment, our right not to incriminate ourselves, that's where we get our right to remain silent. It's gone. The 10th Amendment's gone. You're looking at a totalitarian takeover. I mean, and they produce this stuff, and the people on ground level don't even know about it or don't care about it.
That's crazy.
And they're using it they're doing this under the guise of term limits and a balanced budget amendment to try to get this thing passed. And though we can deal with those two issues momentarily, but if they really wanted to just amend the Constitution, do an amendment through Congress, it's been done 27 different times before, and the Constitution hadn't been overhauled, but they don't want that. The higher-ups, they want it overhauled. That's why they want to call it an Article 5 convention. And if you look at the precedents, the precedent was set in 1787, when they founded in Philadelphia. Some people even, I think Gary North termed it the conspiracy in Philadelphia because they did it in secret. They were supposed to, the delegates there at that constitutional convention was supposed to amend the Articles of Confederation. And what did they do? They overhauled the Articles of Confederation, threw it out, and come up with a brand new constitution. And so if that was done by more conservative, more godly men, imagine what would happen today. I mean, it's crazy, some of the stuff that they think that's going to take place. And not to mention, they say it's going to be limited to just one or two things or whatever they want to call it for. But Gavin Newsom wants to call an Article 5 convention to take the Second Amendment from us. Do you think he's going to sit idly by and watch this thing take place? I think not. You think BLM's going to sit idly by while this thing goes on, or Antifa? I mean, you'd probably see more rioting during this thing than has ever seen before. And there's no way to control it. I think that's probably the biggest threat right now. And it's got Republicans on board with it going, no, we need this. It's not the Democrats pushing for it. Now, there is a Democratic organization pushing for it. So you got, and this is what the deep state does. They stack the deck. They got Democrats pushing in one organization and Republicans pushing for it in the other organization. So Convention of States is predominantly a Republican-based organization. Wolfpack is pushing for an Article 5 convention as well on the Democratic side. And some of their rhetoric is, well, no liberal wants to do this. Well, I just named Gavin Newsom, Lindsey Graham, who's a known rhino in South Carolina, and, Wolfpack. And so I often, when I talk about the Convention of States movement, Article 5 movement, I often ask the question, and I'll ask you the question, what's the difference between a liberal Democrat and a rhino Republican?
There is no difference.
There is a difference, and it's a very slight difference, but there is a difference. And the difference is, at least the liberal Democrat is honest about being liberal. See, the rhino Republican talks conservative. He talks, oh, I like gun rights. Oh, I like this. I like that and the other. But then when he goes to Columbia, or he goes to D.C. or the State House, and he votes like a raging liberal Democrat. And there's no difference. I mean, in South Carolina, here we got a Speaker of the House that appoints Democrats as committee chairs in a state with a Republican supermajority. I mean, what can you say to that? I mean, that's a telltale sign. And how long has he been the chair? Several years. And nobody seems to care. The establishment is pushing him, and nobody seems to care. But I was in the military, and I love arms and armaments and different things like that, and I have several myself, and I want to protect that. I'll quote Sir William Blackstone. He said, slaves do not have arms. Slaves do not have arms. And that's what the deep state is pushing for. They're pushing to enslave us, because if we don't have arms to protect ourselves, then they can tell us what to do, whatever they want us to do. And we do it or we die.
So this Convention of States, is that part of Project 2025?
I haven't really looked into that. I think it may be a part of it, but they've been around for a while. Mark Meckler used his position in the Tea Party movement to basically, he got the contact list and used that list to recruit people into the Convention of States movement, and he give himself a $500,000 salary. And that's the other thing. They've got a ton of money, and we don't even know where it's coming from. Mark Levin was against it, and then he got $600,000 from Convention of States, and now he's for it. Jim DeMint, he got $140,000 year over year to go around touting this Convention of States movement and saying how great it is. And the list goes on and on. We have email traffic from where they offered Rush Limbaugh $2.2 million, and he turned them down. And so they've got all this money, and it's going and going and going, and we don't know where it's getting it from. And I have my suspicions, but anything that I say would be speculation at this point.
All right, so how does JBS view the relationship between gun ownership and limited government?
Well, gun ownership is key to a limited government. I mean, that's why we had the militias. That's why we had the state guards. That's why we had or the National Guard to stand up to the tyranny of the federal government. See, our government, our founding fathers give us a government to fight against tyranny, and that's the beauty of it. I don't know if you caught the interview between Putin and Tucker Carlson about a year or so ago, but one thing that Putin pointed out about our government that resounded with me was he said, you Americans are so inefficient. You got all these governments. You got all these legislators. Each state has a legislator. Each county has a legislator. I would eliminate all those legislators and just have one in D.C. You know, the consolidation of power. And that's spoken by a communist, you know, wanting centralization of control. But the beauty of our government is we have state legislators and state governments to stand up to the tyranny of the federal government. You know, the doctrine of the lesser magistrate. That's how America was born, was through the doctrine of the lesser magistrate and the doctrine of nullification, standing up to the tyrant King George and saying, no, we're not going to, you're violating the Magna Carta, no taxation without representation. And so we're not going to we're going to nullify, not enforce your laws. And we have, not only do we have state governments, but we have local governments, your local sheriff or, your local town council or city councils, to stand up on that level, and county levels, county council that stands up to the tyranny of the state. And it's a multi-layered thing to stand up all against the tyranny and to hold each other accountable. It's basically an accountability a check. You know, there's checks and balances for that. And I can give you some examples. One of my favorite examples happened in was it Arizona or Colorado? I forgot what it was. That liberal governor said, I'm tired of all these school shootings. I'm gonna put a 6-month ban on open carry. And what happened? Are you familiar with that story?
No.
So all the sheriffs stood up in the state after she put out this, basically an edict. And they all marched on the Capitol. I think it was like 40-something sheriffs and all their deputies and several other people that they deputized. And they all marched on the Capitol open carrying, saying, come and take it, you know? And guess what happened? She backed down. That is the doctrine of the lesser magistrate. If we work together and fight back against tyranny, we outnumber them. I mean, the conservatives outnumber the liberals 100-1, if not 200-1. We just need to stand up and make a little noise, or use what our founders called the disquietude of the people, because the left is disquiet. They make a lot of noise, and they're few and far between. If we all stood up and made half as much noise as they made, I mean, we'd be unstoppable. But you got people that are scared, people that are afraid. I mean, we got to get back to give me liberty or give me death, and be willing to fight this spiritual warfare that we're in that comes out in the political realm. But you can see it across the board what's going on. We all just need to stand up and say enough's enough.
So, Arthur, JBS places a lot of emphasis on educating citizens. Why is civic literacy so critical right now?
So most people, they want to focus on the short game. We just got to get people elected. We just got to get Republicans elected. Well, if just getting people elected or just getting Republicans elected were the solution to the problem, then we should be moving right. We should be going more conservative. And yet it seems that we're continuing to go left. Now, why is that? That's because the Overton window keeps moving left. You get more and more liberal Republicans, especially in a state like South Carolina, where you have a Republican supermajority. Liberals know that. And in most counties, with the exception of like Charleston and Columbia, if you win the Republican primary, you win. And so the liberals just run on the Republican ticket. That's not even a question, because whoever wins the Republican ticket wins. The battle's in the primary. It's not in the general election. And so what happens is you get more and more liberal people running on the Republican side. Now, the long-term game is educating the public, because if you have educated a public, you don't have to tell them how to vote. They know if they're informed. And so if you think about it, the things that go about a day we couldn't even think about that 20 years ago or 30 years ago, or during my grandfather's time, 40, 50 years ago, the things that they do during the legislature would not work then. And so what's happened is they slowly are molding public opinion, educating the people left and left and left. And I think it's a lot of ignorance. People stand up and they swear an oath to the Constitution and they've never read it. They weren't taught it in school. We don't teach civics anymore. We teach we do teach some history that's skewed, and what do they call it now? Social studies. They don't teach civics, how our government should be run. They teach social studies. That's replaced it. So for the sake of learning, they don't learn anything. And I had a conversation with a senator in Georgia, and I said, you've been in the Senate for a few years now. How many people in the Senate, how many senators has actually read the U.S. Constitution? And he said, probably 4, 5, maybe. Out of all the senators in Georgia, 4 or 5. I said, here's your kicker, because you're a state legislator. Not only do you swear an oath to the U.S. Constitution and uphold it, you swear an oath to your state constitution to uphold it. How many senators in Georgia have read your state constitution? And you can apply this to any state, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, right, wherever. And the senator said, what? I said, what, you? He goes, yeah, I've read it. But it's ignorance. They swear an oath to this stuff and they don't even know what's in it. You got this fly-by-seat-of-the-pants Nancy Pelosi. Well, we got to sign it to find out what's in it, kind of deal. And I like Ron Paul's approach. Just vote no until you have time to read it. And if there's anything at all, just vote no. 95% of the time, if you get in there as a legislator, if you vote no, you're going to be right 95% of the time. And so it's extreme ignorance. It's extreme ignorance of not only the Constitution, but the Bible. There's this movement within Christendom called the Two Kingdoms movement, where Christ is not king of the secular realm, the civil realm, and we can't use the Bible to establish civil government. We got to use, I don't know what you use instead of the law of God, the Code of Hammurabi. Certainly not Sharia law or natural law. That's anything goes at that point. You can just make it up. I mean, Karl Marx appealed to natural law to write the Communist Manifesto. I mean, you don't have real clarity there looking at a creation that has been affected by sin to apply and establish civil government. I mean, it's everything in the world against the law of God and against the Constitution. And you say, well, the Constitution doesn't mention God. Well, there was a reporter that asked George Washington right after they ratified it, why didn't they mention God in the federal Constitution? And he said, well, we didn't think we needed to repeat ourselves. It was already in all the state constitutions. And with the exception of Rhode Island, that's true at the time. And so it's a document that allows for, when it says religious freedom, we have to understand it within context. They assumed Christianity. They meant it can be more correctly interpreted today as freedom of denomination. They assumed Christianity. And I'm not just pulling that out of nowhere. There's been several judges and attorneys that I've spoken with, Willow Moore being one of them, several other attorneys that would say the same thing with that, because they understood it as, it was understood to be Christian. I don't think our founders would allow a mosque to be built or, a satanic temple. That would never fly when, in the beginning there. So we were stuck on this, we need religious freedom. Yeah, we need religious freedom within Christendom. And so that's why education is key. We have to understand the Constitution. We have to understand what made America so great in how it was supposed to function. And it was not what the Constitution allowed the government to do. What made America so great was One of the reasons was what it didn't allow government to do. Congress shall make no law preventing freedom of speech or freedom of press. It was what it prevented government to do and allowed the citizens to have some sovereignty over their lives to build a business and worship how they wanted to worship and grow their business, and it created economic wealth. And you look at the opposite. Anytime the government increases in size, it has to tax the people more to pay for it, or you're going to pay for it in inflation. And so that takes money away from the people, so they don't have as much money to spend, and it hurts the economy. And so look at any government, the more government they have, the less wealth the people have. Like I said, that's what made America so great, was what it prevented government to do. So you have a couple of different principles. One is the regulative principle of interpretation of the Constitution. So what that means is you can only do what the Constitution allows you to do. Few and defined powers is what our founding fathers said. They are defined in the Constitution, and they are few. And the normative principle is, well, the government can do anything it wants to do as long as it isn't forbidden in the Constitution. And really, you can't operate like that. You cannot operate like that. A covenant made, an agreement made, cannot operate on the normative principle of interpretation or of contracts. I'll give you an example. Let's say I take my car to the shop and I say, I need new brakes, and if the rotors need to be replaced, you replace the rotors, and I sign a work order, okay? And that work order says, replace the brakes and the rotors if need be. I'm authorizing them to do this. Now, I come back the next day, and my blue Mustang is now orange, and they have installed a $10,000 stereo system and some $10,000 rims on my car. And oh, and by the way, the brakes aren't fixed. And then he hands me the bill, and the bill reflects all these things that they've done to my car. And I say, wait a minute. We signed a work order. I didn't authorize you to paint my car. I didn't authorize you to install a $10,000 stereo system or rims. And he says, well, hold on. You didn't tell me I couldn't. Well, how long would that work order have to be? Don't touch the fourth lug nut on the driver's side front tire. Don't touch the timing belt. Don't touch the pistons. Don't touch the fifth lug nut on the passenger side rear tire. I mean, that work order would be the reams of paper that they push through Congress. It's impossible to operate like that. And so you see the folly in that. I hope that people can see the folly in the normative principle of interpretation. And basically, it's just an excuse to do whatever they want to do. And that's what they're using it as. No covenant, no agreement can operate on the normative principle. And that's what they're doing to legislate laws against arms and armaments, to take our First Amendment right away, freedom of speech, to search and seize things that they don't need to be searching without a warrant. It just basically violate all of our rights. And people sit by and, they're scared and they say, well, I'm glad wasn't me. Well, unless we all stand up together, you're next, or your children are next. Because look at the educational system. Too many times do I hear, well, I raised them right, but then I sent them off to college and they came back a raging liberal. And it's designed to do that. It's so, well, the school system's broken. No, it's not broken. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do.
So can you share a success story where JBS or local citizens effectively pushed back against government oversight or overreach, rather?
I can give you a bunch of them. One in particular that comes to mind is in the state of Georgia, South Georgia. The UN wanted to designate the Okefenokee Swamp as a World Heritage Site. Now, they'll say it's a great honor. It's this is it's going to bring tourism to the swamp, and, it'll help industry and, different things like that. But what they don't tell you is As soon as they designated a World Heritage Site, they'll designate a buffer zone. Let's say 250 acre radius around it. And then the people that live in that radius, within that circle, if you want to, add an addition to your house, you got to get their permission. If you want to put a building behind your house, storage building behind your house, you got to get their permission, because we have to preserve the swamp, and we designated this a buffer zone. And it's basically a backhanded way to eminent domain and take the sovereignty over our land from us. And so, knowing this, we had several people, I guess hundreds of people, go to the different counties that it affected, petitioning their county council members to ban it and just stir up make people aware of it, so that they did not let them designate this as a World Heritage Site. And it hit the radio, it was all over the news, different things like that, and they were able to stop it. And, I established a JBS chapter there to stay ever vigilant, because, we stopped them now, but in a year from now, they may come back and try it again. The price of freedom is ever vigilance. And we can't rest on our laurels. We can't fall asleep in the second half, because the minute you fall asleep, the minute that you say we won, is the minute that they strike. And it's sad. People, when Trump got elected, well, Trump's elected, I can rest easy, we've won, blah, blah, blah. And, people fall asleep, and that's when the deep state acts, is when everybody's asleep. I mean, the reason why this last election in 2024 was not stolen like in 2020, because our elections aren't any better. We're still using the same machines as 2020. But the difference was everybody was watching for another steal. They were aware. And when all eyes are on you, it's hard to cheat. When you bring things into the light, because darkness likes shadows, it like stay hidden. And when everybody's watching you, and everybody was watching this election to see what would happen. And so it made it a lot harder for them to cheat. But what they do is they wait. When people fall asleep, they just go right back to cheating. Just business as usual. So we have to stay ever vigilant in educating people, educating our young people, everybody, on how our government is supposed to run, what freedom looks like, and what makes our government so much better than a Russia or Soviet Union or Germany or China or whatever. And, those people that say, oh, well, we need this, we need universal health care, we need whatever. Well, go to Canada where they have it. Go over there. I had one guy that say, oh, we need a monarchy again. And I was like, what? Move to England and enjoy your 60% income tax. And the king, you got to get the king's permission to kill the king's deer. You got to get the king's permission to run a business. You got to pay the king tax to, for his land. I mean, that's not freedom. That's slavery. And,
right.
We need to fight back and be ever vigilant against those ideologies that are ever encroaching on our rights. And so the chapters there, they go to all the local event things, and they stay ever vigilant. So for the next time that they try to push to take the sovereignty of their property through a World Heritage Site and a buffer zone, they'll be there waiting to make a lot of noise again, to push back. Because here's the thing, the Gospel of John talks about it. The light reveals the darkness, and the darkness will not overcome it. Anytime there is pushback by good men, they recoil, they retreat. And I've seen it time and time again. It doesn't take a majority, it takes a minority that's dedicated to fighting against evil.
So what's your message to someone who believes that they're just one person and can't make a difference?
Well, that's why I start chapters of the John Birch Society, to work together to fight back against this stuff, because one person can't go to all the things on the locals thing. I mean, you've got school board, zoning and planning, economic development, GOP meeting, Democratic Party meeting, county council, city council, all these different things that happen on the local level, and they typically meet once a month. And one person can't go to all those things. So you got to band together and work together to what's going on in your local community, because that's who you can affect. That affects you more so than who the president is, believe it or not. Who your sheriff is, who's on your school board, who's on your city council and county council. So think of it this way. A lone wolf can only be so effective. But if a wolf is in a pack, it's a multiplier. You can be so much more effective in a pack. And my long-term goal, and it's a lofty goal, is to see a JBS chapter in every county in the Southeast. South Carolina has, 46 counties. Georgia has 159. Just being ever vigilant, fighting back against tyranny on the local level, and then going to the other counties beside them and teaching them how to do what we're doing and spreading it so that we can fight back on the state level. And then when the states come together, they can fight back on the federal level. It's bottom up.
So I guess it's kind of like a football team or a baseball team or a basketball team. One single individual is not going to win the game. It's everybody working together as a team, right? And that's why we encourage people to join the John Birch Society. I joined it back in, I guess, November, when Bruce asked me to come talk about the Second Amendment. I'm with the South Carolina Carry, and so he invited me to come talk, and that motivated me to join the John Birch Society because I had looked into it, and I certainly believe in the mission and the vision for the John Birch Society has, and I'm glad that I was there when you spoke. I guess it was recently, right? Last month? You came to the Somerville location and spoke. Really enjoyed that. So, yeah. So, I got some final questions here. We'll wrap it up. If there's one liberty-focused action every listener should take this year, what is it?
Wow.
Join the John Birch Society.
Join the John Birch Society. Join a chapter of the John Birch Society.
Right.
So, when you're fighting a group that wants the totality of your life, there's so many different branch issues. I mean, not only are we fighting to keep our gun rights, we're fighting the educational system because they're educating our children to be communist. We're fighting to get out of the UN that has these non-government organizations implementing things in America that doesn't care about our constitutional rights because they're not bound by the Constitution. But here's the thing. All the branch issues, all these different things that you want to deal with, if you cut the tree down at the root, all the branch issues comes with it. And that's the beauty of the John Birch Society, is we talk about all these branch issues to make people aware of what's going on. And the people that are pushing this agenda to take all of our rights from us, expose them, make people aware. Basically, it's kind of like waking people up from the Matrix, red pilling people, because there's so many different things. It's not just one thing. It's an entire worldview, if you will. So exposing those things, and before you can get people on board, you got to get educated yourself. There's some books I would recommend. One of them would be The Creature from Jekyll Island by James Perloff. G. Edward Griffin, sorry. The next book is by James Perloff, The Shadows of Power. You got to get educated yourself, and then once you get educated, you got to educate the other people to get them a part of your wolf pack, if you will, part of your team to fight back against tyranny and to expose the deep state. But if there's one action item that I would say that would be important is we need to get out of the UN or defund the UN, because they're the backbone, if you will, of the deep state pushing to take our rights from us. And if you take the backbone from the enemy, they'll be struggling.
So what gives you hope in today's fight for constitutional freedom?
My God raises people from the dead. I mean, look throughout history. 3% of the population can affect it. It was 3% of the population that, raised the alarm against the greatest military in the world, the British military. It doesn't take a majority. It takes a minority that's dedicated, that's willing to stand up and say, give me liberty or give me death, and to fight tooth and nail and get other people on board to fight against it. Because I read my Bible, and it guarantees me success. Because I know who wins in the end. And I'm going to fight like a champion. I'm going to fight like a conqueror. Because my King, King Jesus, is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And he sways the hearts of men. And that gives me hope, and the guaranteed success that we need. And here's the thing, the more they encroach on our rights, the more people are aware. Look at COVID, when they mask mandates, lockdowns, all that stuff, people became aware. Hey, something's wrong, I'm going to stand up and fight. And even on the homeschool level, when they started going to school remotely, parents were made aware of what their children are actually being taught. And they're like, oh, I don't like this. You're teaching what to my children? It's raising awareness through education, because most of the time the battle's fought and lost, and the modern person, the average person, don't even know there was a battle. We're too distracted by circuses and bread, or, I like the Carolina Gamecocks, go Gamecocks. But we're so distracted with those things that we don't pay attention to the things that matter. What they're doing at the State House in Columbia, what they're doing to the State House in Atlanta or in D.C. And don't get me wrong, I like the Gamecocks, but I don't let it be a distraction for what actually matters, because whether the Gamecocks win or lose, that really doesn't affect me. I mean, it might affect me emotionally, but it doesn't affect my life. But what they do in the State House and what they do in D.C., that affects me. And that's what matters.
Right. And our children and our grandchildren are going to be the direct recipients of what we do or don't do. So we've got work to do while we're still here, right?
Absolutely.
Yep. So thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Liberty and Gun Rights Podcast. A big thank you to Arthur Hampton and the John Birch Society for shedding a light on the vital connection between local action and national liberty. If you got value from this conversation, please share it with someone who cares about protecting our constitutional rights. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe so you never miss a guest who's fighting for freedom. Stay informed, stay active, and most of all, stay free. Until next time, keep your powder dry and your principles strong. And Arthur, I want to thank you for being here and spending time with me, and we'll get this message out to anybody that'll listen.
All right. Thank you, James.